Xbox. Don't do it. Keep him. Keep him. Better be in this video or I'm gonna cry.
Welcome to an honest Akhtar Bros review. That's what we're calling them now. We're talking about Umbrella Academy Season 2, the show. And so, we're gonna try and keep this spoiler free. If you want even more in-depth discussion about it, head on over to our podcast that we did about it. Mm-hmm. But we're gonna try and keep this nice and short and just kind of give our thoughts in a spoiler-free way. There's probably going to be spoilers of the first season, but that's to be expected because...
Why would you be watching a Season 2 review if you haven't seen the first season?
So, I think our general impressions are good.
Up thummy.
Up thummy. Is that the new thing that we say?
That's the new rating system.
That sounds like wrong in a way. I don't know.
Is there anything wrong with that? If there's something wrong with that internet, I'm sure they'll let us know.
Up thummy. Oh boy. Our general impression of it was that we liked it. It was a good continuation of the first season, which we liked. It's a departure from the books. From the comics.
Whatever
the comic books.
Comic books, if you will. Graphic novels.
It's a departure from that, but they've really sort of come into their own. Mm-hmm. I was worried a little bit that since this is even more of a departure from the comics than the first season was, that maybe they would sort of lose their footing because, while the first season was quite a bit of a departure, they still kind of bare bones followed the story. Mm-hmm.
There was less for them to follow this season.
Yeah, this one was less so, and so I was wondering, do they have enough to do it on their own?
Basically, or do they have what it takes to continue?
Or are they going to pull a Game of Thrones? And so they ended up pulling through. They were able to continue with the story that they were inspired to make,
yeah,
based off of the works.
Yeah.
And so
we just think they did a good job continuing the story they wanted to tell. They did a good job with the characters as well. We thought that all the characters, for the most part, were who they were in the first season. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any crazy drastic changes to anyone. The first things that happen, I guess if you're not paying attention and you come straight off the first season, you might be like, what, this happened that time, and now I don't understand why this is going on. But I think if you're paying attention, you should be able to follow it pretty easily, and even if you miss it and don't understand, they explain it later.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that happened at the end of the first season is that they all became kids.
Yeah.
And then, so I thought that the implication there was that they were going to go way back.
Go back in the past.
And be children and be friends with Vanya. But I'm almost glad that that's not what they did. But
yeah, and so
it was almost like a bit of a retcon because I'm not sure why they turned them into kids.
I think just kind of like to be like, time travel.
Yeah, I guess so.
But then again, it doesn't really make sense. I think that maybe they were toying with the idea of that and they weren't maybe entirely sure where they were going to go in season 2.
Yeah.
And so I guess if you're super duper stingy, it's somewhat of a spoiler. Mm-hmm. But in the first 3 seconds, you learn that that's not true, so I don't think it's a spoiler. That they're adults continuing.
If you've seen a trailer, then...
Exactly, you know what's going on. That's not to say that we don't see them in kid form throughout the season. Mm-hmm. But yeah. And so, yeah.
I think that just kind of moving into some other stuff is that the effects throughout are, on par with the first season. Mm-hmm. For flashbacks, when we see Pogo again, he's looking stellar as always.
Yeah.
There are always, as to be expected with Netflix series, some animation.
Yeah, it's not a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster.
But
it's true, and I know that there's a lot of money put into it, but it's not like it's. I don't want to pull any. I don't want to offend anyone. It's not like it's a giant Star Wars film
Yeah.
that you can't tell the difference between reality and,
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
and-
that Star Wars always has the best animation,
and
because
so,
we know
like,
it doesn't, but
Yeah.
it's a TV show.
It's a
That's
TV
what we'll
show,
say.
and it has its little lapses, but it's nothing that you can't just go, oh, okay, I'm fine
Yeah,
with
no,
that.
there's never really anything that takes you out of the show.
Yeah, exactly. I think in any other aspects, the camera work is always very cool on these shows.
They have a very unique style,
They
and
have-
it's
yeah.
all always I find it's very interesting.
Yeah,
cool
and
to
especially
watch.
kind of in this season, they kind of played with it being fitting with the time period as well to kind of help tell that narrative.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else
The
is there?
incorporation of music. This is something they did in the first
Mm.
season, and they continued it this season. It's very good.
Yeah, just
you know?
having a killer soundtrack.
Yeah, a great soundtrack, and just kind of the way it's woven throughout is just a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there was any times where I doubted the characters. That is to say, the acting was very good.
Okay,
I
I
think-
thought you were going off something to the music.
No.
Done
I'm
music.
saying, guys, moving on from the music. The acting was spectacular. I think a
Yeah.
standout for us
Yeah.
is Aidan Gallagher, who plays Five.
Mhm.
Who there's never a second where we don't buy
Yeah,
that
and
character.
again, like kind of what Aiden was saying is not to say that any of the other characters are bad or not even as good, but it's just kind of a standout thing because a lot of the time you see with younger, almost child actors, that it sometimes things get a bit wonky and it's just kind of like not always believable, especially in this role that he's an old man in a young person's body, but going through it and like
Yeah, he sells it the whole time.
he sells it the entire time. There's not a second that I don't believe him as a character, and
Exactly.
I just find myself continually giving props to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I think that
Kind of while we're on characters, is the new characters that they introduce, I think are all great. Like there's nothing that no one's introduced and it's like, why did they do that? Or like that doesn't really fit in the universe.
Mhm.
Everything feels like it belongs there, and everything is a welcome addition.
Yeah, exactly. I think that generally, just watching it, it's very entertaining to watch. You're interested
you're
to see
sucked
what's
in the
next.
whole time.
Every time they start to introduce a new sort of arc that they're going off of, you're always really excited to see where they're going to go with it. And
It's
there's
very
sort of
very binge worthy.
yeah, exactly. And there's one arc in particular that I remember that like when it was sort of first introduced, I was really excited for it, and it's sort of this sequence that we touched on in the podcast, and so if you want to know exactly what I'm referring to, but it's a thread with Five that I thought was just really fascinating and interesting, and kind of just got me very interested in how they were going to explore that, and very interested in how they did explore that, and it was just a wild time.
Yeah.
A few things that we are being critical of,
this
kind
is
of
what
nitpicking.
that's what I was gonna say. Is that we want to brand it as an honest review, so we want to keep with that and be honest. Is that not obviously, but it's very hard in this day and age for things to be labeled as perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, honestly, this was very, very good. But yeah, not like we have our gripes, I suppose. There are certain things that maybe we didn't like so much.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, if you've seen the first season, and I'm sure you have if you're watching this review, is this season deals heavily in time travel, because at the end of the last season they time jumped, and so the majority of this season is spent at a point in the past, which I'm sure is not a surprise.
Yeah.
And so when you're at any point in the past, anything you would be doing then would be affecting
and
future.
Basically I think what Aiden's going with is there were some things with the time travel that were, I guess I'll say, vague, and maybe not necessarily laid out.
Yeah.
And there are things that I noticed and things that I'm aware of, and kind of things that I noticed in the universe, but also I noticed them in the show, but I also took note of them kind of as watching it as somebody who would be telling the story. It kind of almost as what were the people making this thinking by doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
And so from that point of view, I understand why they did it. And this is with that, I know that was kind of convoluted, but with that, we're going to be making a video exclusively about time travel in Umbrella Academy, and so that will be out soon. And hopefully, the cryptic message that I just said will be able to be decoded.
Yeah, and I think that
by
just
you watching that.
Kind of a way to put it is that they sort of bent the rules of time travel to suit the story they were telling, as opposed to staying super strict to a set of time travel rules.
Yeah.
So also having their story make sense.
If you're a big time travel fan,
if you're very stingy on the time travel, then you
might have some gripes.
You might have some gripes with this, but it's the kind of show where you can just kind of let it go.
It doesn't let it go, and it's really not the main focus. Kind of
exactly.
It's not the show doesn't rely on the science of that being sound.
Mm-hmm. And of course my analytical brain, every time they talk to any person or do this in the past, I'm like, well, it's completely changed now. Like this would have changed this would have changed this, but because of the story and because of how things do end up, I'm able to sort of just say, okay, I guess it's this, and we'll address that in more detail.
And I think kind of the
point.
way to sum it up that we said on the podcast that I'll kind of say here is just that they the time travel kind of rules took a backseat to story, which to us at least is an all right thing to do. If you're sacrificing maybe some of the scientifical meddling of time travel for the sake of the story being more sound, then that's something I can...
Yeah, that's something I can forgive.
I can forgive that, yeah. Another thing that was kind of iffy was a couple of the powers were a bit vague with a couple people in particular. I don't want to say the names
it doesn't really matter if we say who it is. It's that Allison's powers
one of them is
Allison. Point had a weird connotation just at the very beginning.
Yeah, just some strange implications with something they did.
And that kind of open too big of a broad road for her
just
powers.
Basically what we'll say is something that happens in the first 5 minutes of the first episode has strange implications for what she can and can't do.
Yeah, and kind of breaks her capabilities and limitations.
Yeah, but again, we talk about it spoiler heavy on the podcast, so if that's something you're looking for, check that out.
Yeah. As far as other characters,
I don't know if you had one, but the other one I have in mind is a large spoiler, and it's just kind of they leave it very vague and just don't really touch upon it. I'm trying to think if there's any other characters that they kind of did that with.
Diego is one character who gets sort of a buff to his abilities that seems, that may seem out of the blue at first, but then once you think about what his power set is, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess it seems like he could be able to do that.
Yeah, but I think that's it as far as, power things go, everyone else is... Luther is strong, and that's pretty simple,
Yeah.
There's not really a whole lot of wiggle room there. I will say that maybe it kind of seems like his strength level fluctuates a bit throughout the series.
For what is convenient to the plot.
Yeah, and that is not necessarily my favorite.
As well as when Five
can teleport.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of some of the stuff that we had some qualms with, but is there any other things about that?
I can't really think of other things that I necessarily didn't like. Overall, I just kind of enjoyed watching it, and it was just sort of pleasant to to sit back and keep watching and see
to
what's
have
going to happen
content.
next. Yeah, and have content
Mhm.
finally, and so it gets the up thumb. What did you call that?
Up thummy.
Up thummy from me.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, just kind of the only other thing that I was gonna say is that if you're a fan of the first season, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be a fan of this season. It seems like it only continues what was going on and is, I will say, at very least equal to as good as the first season. Depending on who you are, you might think it's better.
Yeah.
You know, I would say that it's at least equal to the first season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I know that there are some people out there, I again mentioned this on the podcast, that there are some people that are heavy comic fans that like those and may not be huge fans of the show.
Mm-hmm.
This season is even more separate from the comics.
It's a continuation of the show.
And so
which is
people who are diehard comic fans may not enjoy that. But that said, me being someone who read the comics even before any of the seasons had come out, I found it pleasant to not know what's going to happen at all times.
Yeah.
You know, like there were things in the first season that I could kind of go, okay, I know where this is going. I know some of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But this season, I didn't really have any of that. It was all new to me, which personally I enjoyed. You know, there may be some people that are like, oh, I don't like that they didn't do this like in the comic books, but it's personal preference, you know. So yeah.
I think that one last thing, I'll just go back to time travel real quick, is that I actually enjoyed kind of how they started it off. It was kind of a unique way of, you know, exploring the idea of time and being trapped in time, and how, you know, and just how they did that, I thought was really cool. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, and
is that I thought it was somewhat unique the way that they started that off.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like a really interesting way of doing it.
And what I'll just add to that is, if you're kind of on the fence, you watch the first season and are kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch the second season, watch the first 5 minutes of the second season, and if you're not hooked, I don't know what else, you know, because to me it was an amazing opening to a season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
And so this honest review, which is what we're trying to sort of go with from now on, has still earned Umbrella Academy and an up thummy, which is apparently a thing that we say now. And so and we're very critical. If you've ever watched a podcast, you know that. And so for this to have just sort of been a thing that we can enjoy, despite the time travel
nonsense,
hairiness, then, you know, it
did pretty well.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And obviously you'll judge for yourself, but if you're taking our word for it, you know, give it a shot, and I bet you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think it's because it sounds like up thumb me, like it's a request.
Yeah, thumbs up us.
Hey, up thumb me.
Yeah.
Yep, up thumb us. Hit the like button.
Watch him have like this weird internet meaning.
Up thummy. Anyways.